As we grow older, something curious starts to happen. We begin to crave peace more than excitement, clarity more than chaos, and authenticity more than blood ties. Strange, isn't it? But here's a truth many people are too afraid to say out loud. Sometimes the most dangerous people in your later years are the ones you've known the longest. People you grew up with, people you call family, and the first kind of person you absolutely must avoid as you age: the guilt tripper. I want you to really hear this, not just with your ears, but with your heart wide open. Because guilt tripping often comes wrapped in something that looks a lot like love. It sounds like concern, it feels like family. But when guilt becomes a tool of manipulation, make no mistake, it's poison, subtle, slow, but poison all the same. Guilt trippers don't need to raise their voices. They don't have to shout. No, they're more refined than that. They sigh. They go quiet. They let their silence hang in the air like a thick fog. You say no just once, and suddenly you're painted as selfish, cold, or uncaring. Why? Because you drew a boundary. Because you finally said, "I can't do that anymore," or "I need time for myself." And if you're not careful, you'll spend your golden years apologizing simply for choosing yourself. These are the people who'll make you feel like you owe them something just for existing. That somehow, by getting older, you've become a burden. It's not loud. It's not obvious. It might show up in little jabs like, "Well, I guess I'll figure it out since you're so busy." Or, "I was there for you when you needed me. Look at how you repay me." Sound familiar? Let me say this clearly. Your life is not a debt to be repaid. Not to your children. Not to your siblings. Not to lifelong friends. You don't owe anyone your peace of mind. You don't owe them your health. And you certainly don't owe them the little energy you have left just to help them feel powerful, in control, or morally superior. Because that's not love. That's control dressed up in emotional currency. And as you grow older, you realize that time, not money, not approval, is your most sacred asset. And guilt trippers, they're expert time thieves. They'll pull you into draining conversations, push you into exhausting obligations, tie you to relationships that slowly erode your sense of worth. You'll hear things like, "If you really loved me, you'd do this." But here's the truth. Love is not proven through depletion. You don't prove love by abandoning yourself. You don't prove love by shrinking. You prove love by living in your truth, with honesty, with strength, and yes, with boundaries. And here's the most dangerous part. Guilt trippers are masters at making you question your own reality. You start thinking, maybe I am being selfish. Maybe I am not doing enough. That's how they keep you tethered, by pulling the strings of your doubt. But real freedom? It begins the moment you recognize emotional manipulation for what it is, a form of control. And in this stage of life, you simply don't have time to be controlled anymore. You need space to rest, to heal, to breathe, and to live. You've spent decades showing up for others, raising children, supporting families, giving everything you had. Now is the time to reclaim what's left of your energy for you, not out of bitterness, not to be cold, but to be free. I understand, it might sound harsh, especially in cultures where family loyalty is sacred. But I'm not saying cut people off just because they're difficult. I'm saying protect yourself from those who weaponize guilt. There's a difference, a big one. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is to disappoint the expectations that were never healthy to begin with. And here's the truth. Now, remember what we just talked about, how guilt, even when dressed in love, can become a weapon. Well, here's something else that's hard for many to accept. Just because someone is your family doesn't mean they're good for your soul. Let me say that again, and let it land this time. Just because someone is your family doesn't mean they're healthy for your spirit. This stage of life, these quieter, wiser years, is not about fixing everyone. It's not about stitching together every broken thread in your family tree. You are not here to be the glue that holds it all together. especially not at the expense of your own mental and emotional health. You're not anyone's referee. You're not the unpaid family therapist. And you are definitely not an emotional punching bag. You are here to live, finally, fully and freely. You don't owe anyone an explanation for the boundaries you set, especially not the people who never intended to respect them in the first place. You don't need to justify your peace to those who thrive on chaos. You don't need to explain why you're protecting your heart. You simply need to claim that peace, boldly, quietly, unapologetically, because you didn't stumble into it. You earned it. You earned it through every storm you weathered, every heartbreak you carried in silence, every moment you stayed quiet when you should have spoken up. You earned it on the nights when you gave even when you had nothing left to give. You earned it with your pain, your patience, your persistence. So don't trade that peace for guilt, ever. If someone truly loves you, deeply, selflessly, they will want your peace more than they want your obedience. Because real love doesn't demand, it doesn't guilt trip, it doesn't corner you into submission. Real love respects, it honors, it makes room. It listens, not to respond, but to understand. So as you move through this chapter of your life, stay alert. The guilt trippers may come wrapped in kind smiles, speaking soft words, but if you feel your spirit grow heavier every time they leave, listen to that. Your body knows, your soul knows. You don't need evidence, you already feel it. And if you ever need permission to say no, here it is, clear and simple. Saying no to them is saying yes to yourself, and that's a trade you should never hesitate to make. But guilt trippers aren't the only ones to watch out for. There's another group just as draining and often harder to spot. Let's talk about them next. The constant complainers, the never satisfied critics, what I like to call energy vampires. You know the type. You definitely know the type. These are the people who could win the lottery and still complain about the taxes. The sun could be shining, the sky cloudless, and they'd say, "It's too bright." You're having a peaceful day, and here they come, dragging a storm cloud behind them like it's luggage. In your later years, your energy is no longer unlimited. It's sacred now, something to be spent wisely, carefully. You don't have the same reserves you once had, and you shouldn't have to waste them on people who only take, never give. But energy vampires, oh, they don't care about that. They'll talk at you for hours, unloading every single problem in their life, without once stopping to ask how you are. They won't check in on your heart. They won't pause to see if you're okay. They just keep pouring their darkness into your space, expecting you to carry it. And what's worse, they don't want solutions. They don't want to feel better. They just want company in their misery. They drain your spirit not with dramatic explosions, but with a slow, steady drip of negativity. It's subtle, it's constant, and it's absolutely exhausting. Sometimes, just one phone call, one unexpected visit, one seemingly harmless chat, and suddenly your whole day feels off. You feel irritated, restless, drained, and you can't even explain why. That's how it works. They offload their emotional weight onto you and walk away lighter. Meanwhile, you're left holding bags you didn't pack, carrying burdens that were never yours to begin with. So let me say this plainly. You were not born to be someone's emotional landfill. You were not placed on this earth to absorb the bitterness and blame of everyone around you. That is not your role, especially not now. I know sometimes these people are close, family, lifelong friends, even your own children, and that makes it so much harder. But listen closely. Just because someone is part of your story doesn't mean they get to write your ending. If they can't bring peace into your space, if all they bring is complaint, criticism, and emotional chaos, then, yes, it is absolutely okay to create distance, not out of anger, but out of love for yourself, out of the deep understanding that your emotional well-being matters. You've spent a lifetime giving. Now is the time to guard what little you have left. And you can't afford to pour yourself out for people who only take and take and take, have You ever noticed how, after being around certain people, you just feel smaller? Like your energy has shrunk, your clarity has blurred, your optimism has dimmed? That's not just in your head, that's real. That's the quiet erosion of your peace, happening moment by moment. And over time, it adds up. The toll is heavier than you think. Earlier, we talked about energy vampires, the ones who drain your spirit with endless complaints and negativity. But what happens when that negativity becomes so habitual, so embedded, that the person doesn't even realize they're doing it anymore? That's where we are now. There are people who have been complaining for so long, it's become part of their identity. It's not just something they do, it's who they are. Their entire worldview revolves around what's broken, what's missing, and most importantly, who's to blame. And if you spend enough time around them, something dangerous starts to happen. They don't just drain your energy, they reshape your mindset. They infect your perspective, one bitter comment at a time. And before you even notice, you've started carrying their weight, their worldview, their weariness, as if it were your own. That's the real danger, not just emotional exhaustion. But slow, invisible transformation. You begin to see life not through your eyes, but through their filter of frustration and fear. You begin echoing their cynicism, second-guessing your optimism, and wondering when exactly your light started to dim. So here's the truth. You deserve to be surrounded by people who lift you, people who challenge you with love, not criticism, people who speak hope, not just heartache, people who remind you, even on your worst days, that life is still filled with beauty, wonder, and second chances. And if that's not what your current circle looks like, maybe it's time to tighten the circle. Here's something most people don't say out loud. Peace is louder than noise. It doesn't demand attention. It doesn't beg to be noticed. But when it's missing, you feel it. You feel it in your chest, in your sleep, in your mood, in the silence that suddenly feels too loud. So protect it. Protecting your peace means protecting your energy. And that means stepping back, sometimes even stepping away from people who treat your presence like a place to dump their dysfunction. You are not obligated to answer every call. You are not required to attend every emotional emergency. You do not have to carry what they refuse to release. It's not cold. It's not selfish. It's not unkind to say, "I love you, but I can't carry this with you today." That's not cruelty. That's wisdom. That's boundaries. That's self-respect. There comes a point in life where you have to stop apologizing for choosing peace, where you no longer feel guilty for craving quiet, where you finally understand that silence isn't emptiness, it's healing. And chaos isn't connection, it's corrosion. You've outgrown the noise, and that's something to be proud of. You are entering a season of life where your focus should shift, not to fixing others, but to healing yourself, reflecting, enjoying the moments that still await you, not wasting them tangled in someone else's storm. You've already given so much. You've already carried so much. And now, your energy, it's treasure. It must be guarded, not just shared. So the next time the chronic complainers show up, the critics call with yet another dose of negativity, take a breath and remember this. Not every knock deserves an open door. And just when you think you've learned to recognize all the drains in your life, there's one more that cuts even deeper because it's personal. It's about the people who only show up when they need something. You know the ones I'm talking about. The users. The ones who treat your relationship like a convenience store. They drop in when they're empty, take what they need, and disappear without a word. Now let's talk about them. We just talked about the people who treat your presence like a transaction, those who only show up when it serves them. And now, we have to go even deeper. Because this next truth, it stings. You keep hoping that one day they'll show up simply because they want to be with you. Not because they're in trouble, not because they need a favor, just because they care, because they miss you, because your presence, not your help, is what they value. But life, if you're really paying attention, teaches you a hard truth. Some people will never come unless there's something in it for them, no matter how long. You've known them, no matter how much history you share. A connection built on convenience is not love. It's dependence, it's access, it's habit. And if you're not careful, if you don't learn to say no, it will leave you emotionally bankrupt. One of the toughest lessons we face in our later years is this: being needed is not the same as being loved. Let that settle in. Some people only keep you close because you're easy, because you don't push back, because they know you won't say no. They count on your kindness. They know your heart is generous and your boundaries are soft. So they return again and again, pulling more than just your time or your money. They take your energy, your peace, your patience, and they leave you emptier every time they go. And don't they always come with a story, a heartfelt reason, a convincing excuse? This time it's different, they say. And for a moment, you want to believe them. You want to believe they've changed, that they're finally here because they care, not because they're desperate. But it plays out the same way it always does. You give, they take, their crisis is solved, and just like that, they're gone. It's not the act of being used that hurts the most. It's the slow erosion over time, the steady drip that wears away at your spirit. You begin to feel guilty when you're not available. You second-guess your boundaries. You wonder, am I being too harsh? But deep down, in that quiet space within you, you know, you're not being harsh. You're being used. And it hurts. There's a particular kind of silence that lingers after someone has taken what they wanted and disappeared. It's not peaceful. It's hollow. It whispers a painful truth. They weren't there for you. They were there for what you could give. And if you're still enough, if you really listen, that silence teaches you something vital. You deserve so much more than being someone's emergency plan. You deserve more than being someone's emotional ATM. You deserve people who pour back into you, not just when they're empty, but always. People who show up with consistency, not convenience. With presence, not performance. With love, not just need. And yes, it's hard. It's hard to let go of people you've cared about for years, people you've prayed for, sacrificed for, shared memories with. It's hard to say no to someone you once held in your arms, or cried with, or fed at your table. But you have to ask yourself the question that matters most now. What is this relationship costing me? Not just in money, but in peace, in emotional balance, in spiritual energy. Am I being respected, or just relied upon? Am I being seen, or merely used? And don't be shocked when these same people, once you say no, turn around and call you selfish. That's part of the pattern. It's the guilt tactic, because as long as they can guilt you, they can use you. But the moment you choose peace over pleasing, the moment you stop being emotionally available on demand, that's when their true nature shows. And when that moment comes, don't fight it. Let them go. Let them be angry. Let them twist the story if they need to. But you, stay grounded. Stay rooted in truth. Because you know it deep down. You were not created to be used. You were created to be loved. In this season of your life, you don't need people who keep score. You don't need people who only dial your number when they're drowning. You need people who think of you in quiet moments, who show up for your joy, not just your struggle, who love you for who you are, not for what you can offer. You've spent a lifetime giving. Now, it's time to receive, not just respect, but something even deeper. In the last part, we talked about the kind of people who only come around when they want something, relationships built on convenience, not care. And we said something important. If their love disappears when your resources run out, it was never love to begin with. Now let's move into another kind of relationship, one that can be even harder to recognize, especially at first. But once you see it clearly, everything begins to make sense. Let's talk about the controllers. These are the people who, no matter how old you get, still treat you like you don't know what's best for yourself. They're not always loud. They don't always demand. Sometimes they sound gentle, helpful, even loving. But beneath the soft tone and concerned advice lies something else: control. And I want you to hear this with no doubt in your heart. You do not need to be managed. You need to be respected. It's one of the most subtle and most suffocating forms of emotional manipulation. When someone consistently questions your choices, second guesses your decisions, or gently chips away at your confidence under the guise of just trying to help, what they're really doing is robbing you of your voice, of your autonomy, of your dignity. And by this point in life, you've earned all three. Controllers come in many forms. Some are obvious. They're loud, bossy, always pushing their opinions, trying to direct your every move. But others are quieter, slower. They wrap their control in concern. They don't fear your weakness. They fear your independence. Because when you're independent, they lose their sense of power. So what do? They offer advice you never asked for. They flood you with opinions you didn't request. They pressure you subtly, making you question what you already knew in your heart. You know the type. You say, "I'm thinking about traveling," and they reply, "Isn't that dangerous at your age?" You mention downsizing your home and they say, "I don't think you're thinking clearly." You talk about giving something away and suddenly they're warning, "But what if you need it later?" It's not support. It's not love. It's a steady stream of low-level doubt, dressed up as care. And over time, it can make you feel like a guest in your own life, like you're being supervised, not seen. But let me tell you something important. Age does not take away your right to choose. It strengthens it. You've lived through war, loss, love, healing, heartbreak, new beginnings, and everything in between. You've made hard choices and learned from every one of them. You've built a life from scratch, rebuilt it when necessary, and survived more than most people will ever know. So you've earned the right to say, "I trust myself." Anyone who tries to silence that voice isn't protecting you. They're handling you. And you are not someone who needs to be handled. What makes it even more painful is this. Sometimes the controllers are people who genuinely love you. It could be a child who thinks they're protecting you, a partner who fears change, a friend who assumes they know you better. Then you know yourself. And because their voice is familiar, comforting even, you listen, you doubt, you start to shrink your decisions down to what they will accept. And before you realize it, your life becomes smaller. Not because you wanted less, but because someone else convinced you that you couldn't handle more. But hear this clearly. It is not your job to live a life that makes others comfortable. It's your job to live a life that honors your truth. And if that truth disappoints someone who thought they knew better, so be it. Your freedom is not something you have to earn again and again. You already paid for it, with decades of wisdom, work, and sacrifice. And don't let anyone confuse needing support with needing supervision. Yes, we all need help sometimes. That's human. That's healthy. But needing help doesn't mean surrendering your life. It means inviting someone in as a partner, not handing them the keys like a warden. And here's the thing about controllers. They often act offended when you set a boundary. They'll say things like, "I'm just trying to look out for you." But there's a difference between looking out and looking to control. One comes from love. The other comes from fear. And you've lived too long to let someone else's fear dictate your steps. You deserve to be surrounded by people who trust your voice, people who celebrate your choices, people who believe in your ability to lead your own life. Because let's be honest, if they haven't trusted you by now, what more do you need to prove? You don't need anyone's permission. You don't need anyone to co-sign your life anymore. In the last part, we talked about breaking free from control, about reclaiming your choices and standing firm in your own truth. Because at this stage in life, what you need most isn't management, it's mutual respect. You need people who will walk with you, not walk over you. And yes, that can mean having some tough conversations. It can mean looking someone you love in the eye and saying, "I love you, but this choice is mine." It can mean releasing the constant need to be understood and instead choosing something even deeper, to be respected. That takes courage, real courage. But it's the kind of courage that unlocks freedom. Because when you finally stop explaining your life to people who aren't really listening, you start to hear yourself more clearly. So if there's someone in your life trying to shrink you, someone trying to box you in, treat you like a child, dismiss your dreams, or make you feel foolish for still having goals, stand tall. This is still your life. It's not over, it's not too late, and it's not theirs to direct. Now there's one more kind of person you need to be especially mindful of in this season of your life. The ones who refuse to grow. You know the type. They're stuck, not just in their routines, but in their mindset, in the past, in blame, in bitterness. They wear their age on their face, but not in their spirit. They've figured out how to survive, but they never learned how to evolve. And when you're around them, it feels like trying to move forward with someone pulling you backward, like walking uphill with someone constantly dragging your progress into the mud. Their world, it's small, their thinking, fixed, their heart, closed. And if you're not careful, their stagnation will become your limitation. These are the folks who gossip constantly, but never self-reflect. They're quick to talk about everyone else's mistakes, yet never ask, "What do I need to change?" They act like they've got all the answers, but deep down, they're just afraid of transformation. And here's something you need to remember. Growth doesn't stop when your hair turns grey. If anything, real growth, spiritual growth, becomes even more essential the older you get. Because now, you're not just looking back, you're preparing for something deeper, for peace, for clarity, for legacy, and you simply can't walk into that kind of freedom while clinging to people who refuse to evolve. People who still argue over petty things, who carry grudges like they're trophies, who are still angry about something that happened 20 years ago and refuse to let it go. They'll keep dragging you into conversations that drain your soul, arguments that go nowhere, mindsets that lead to nothing but stress and sorrow. And here's the honest truth. It is not your job to carry people who've chosen to stand still. I know that might sound harsh, but hear me clearly. Your soul was never meant to be trapped in someone else's emotional immaturity. Yes, you may have shared history with them. You may have laughed, cried, prayed, grown up together. But just because you share the past doesn't mean you owe them your future. There will be people who look at you and say, "You've changed," and I want you to hear this as the compliment it truly is. Because if you're not changing, you're not growing. And if you're not growing, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, you're slowly dying on the inside. In the last section, we talked about the importance of surrounding yourself with people who are willing to grow, because emotional stagnation, especially in those closest to us, can slowly weigh down even the strongest spirit. But here's the truth that's even harder to face. People who are stuck don't want to see you evolve. Your growth unsettles them. Your peace reveals their inner unrest. Your healing reminds them of the emotional work they've avoided for years. And so, sometimes, the hardest people to walk away from aren't the toxic or the loud ones. They're the ones you've known the longest. Not because they're good for you, but because they're familiar. They've become part of the rhythm of your life, like a well-worn path, easy to follow, even when it leads nowhere. But here's the truth. Familiarity is not a reason to stay stuck. You can love someone from afar. You can honor your shared past without carrying the emotional weight of it into your future. You can say, "Thank you for the memories," and still walk away in peace. I've seen it more times than I can count. Elders who were rich in years, but stagnant in spirit. They can tell you what happened in their life, but not what it meant. They can recite a list of regrets, but offer no wisdom from it. They have memory, yes, but no meaning. And memory without meaning, that's just a loop, a cycle with no growth, a life lived, but not transformed. And I know you didn't come all this way, through every heartbreak, every breakthrough, every quiet miracle, just to spin in circles. You came this far to find peace, to find clarity, to leave behind more than just stories. You came to leave behind truth, but you can't pass on truth while dragging the weight of people who refuse to reflect, who refuse to grow, who refuse to let go. Their chaos becomes your responsibility. Their pain becomes your prison. And slowly, without realizing it, you'll find yourself pouring water into dead soil, waiting for change that was never going to bloom. So let me say something hard, but necessary. Some people are not interested in becoming better. They are only interested in being right. And you could spend the best years of your final chapter trying to explain, trying to fix, trying to convince, all for someone whose heart simply isn't ready to receive it. That's not your purpose. That's not your calling. That's not your assignment. You are not here to carry grown adults through emotional growth they refuse to pursue. You are here to walk in peace, to keep growing, to surround yourself with others who are doing the same. Find people who are curious, not just opinionated, who are open, not just loud, who are seeking healing, not endlessly rehearsing their pain like a script they can't stop reading. And when you do, you'll feel it. The lightness, the clarity, the breath returning to your lungs. Because growth creates space. It makes room for joy, for hope, for new beginnings. But when you're constantly around people who refuse to grow, it suffocates your spirit. It clouds your mind. It leaves you in a fog that never lifts. You deserve relationships that feel like fresh air, not heavy, damp, suffocating rooms full of unresolved baggage. You deserve people who challenge you in love, not chain you in fear. And if protecting that means shrinking your circle, then so be it. Because a small, honest circle full of truth and growth will always be better than a large crowd full of noise, ego, and emptiness. So when you find yourself surrounded by people who haven't moved an inch in spirit or heart, people clinging to old wounds, old grudges, old stories like medals of identity, take a breath and remember this. There's still one more kind of person you must learn to lovingly, but firmly, distance yourself from, especially in this sacred season of your life. The ones who mock your faith, the ones who roll their eyes when you speak about God, the ones who belittle the very thing that carried you through life's darkest valleys. In the last part, we talked about those who mock your faith, the ones who sneer at the very thing that's kept you anchored. And now we need to go deeper into why that kind of presence simply can't have a place in your life anymore. Because faith isn't weakness. It's not ignorance. It's not something to be pitied or mocked. It's the reason. You made it through storms that should have broken you. It's what held you together when people let you down. It's what whispered, "Keep going," when everything around you was falling apart. So when someone scoffs at that, when they roll their eyes at what you hold sacred, that's not harmless. That's a wound in disguise. And let's be honest, at this stage of life, things get quieter, but deeper. You stop being impressed by noise and start being drawn to meaning. You start thinking about purpose, about eternity, about what really matters beneath the surface of it all. You're not just counting birthdays anymore. You're measuring impact. You're paying closer attention to how your life feels, not just how it looks. And in that sacred space, you don't need sarcasm. You need voices that speak life, not mockery. Even if someone doesn't share your path, they should at least respect it. But some people are so rooted in cynicism, they don't know how to respond to light without trying to dim it. They'll make you feel childish for praying. They'll call your faith outdated. They'll reduce your relationship with God to superstition or fantasy. And here's the danger. If you let those voices get too close, if you let their doubt echo in your mind long enough, it can begin to seep into your spirit. Not because they're right, but because their voice is loud and constant. But hear me clearly. Don't let it happen. Don't let someone else's sarcasm shrink your belief. Don't let their jokes sow seeds of shame into soil that's taken you years to tend. Don't let their bitterness make you second-guess the very thing that's kept your soul alive. Because faith is not fragile, it's fire. It's what has lit the way for you through the darkest nights. It's what held your family together when everything around you was falling apart. It's what healed wounds you thought you'd carry forever. Faith didn't make you blind, it made you wise, it made you resilient. And anyone who can't see that, they're not looking with the right eyes. Yes, it's hard when the ones who doubt your faith are close to you. Maybe it's a friend you've known for decades. Maybe it's a sibling whose heart grew cold. Maybe it's your own child now so enlightened that they call it all old stories. And yes, you love them. You always will. But love doesn't mean tolerating disrespect. Loving someone doesn't mean giving them permission to dishonor what matters most to you. This isn't about trying to convert anyone. It's not about debate or argument. It's about protecting the soil of your soul, because that peace you carry now, you fought for it, you wept for it, you bled for it. You don't owe anyone an explanation for why you believe. You don't have to defend who you pray to or where your hope comes from, because you know what's real. You've lived it. You've felt God's hand steady you when everything else collapsed. You've heard His voice in the stillness, when the world was too loud to offer anything helpful. You've seen His grace show up in moments when you knew, deep down, you didn't deserve it. And let me tell you something. I don't care how educated, how accomplished, or how enlightened someone claims to be. If they haven't walked through your valley, they don't get to mock your light. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is love people from a distance. You can still pray for them. You can still hope for their healing. But you do not have to let them poison your peace or chip away at the foundation you've built your life on, because that is not love. In the last section, we talked about faith, how it's carried you, anchored you, and deserves to be protected from those who mock it. And now, let's name something even more subtle, yet just as harmful. Because sometimes, the attack doesn't come through loud arguments or open insults. It comes wrapped in casual conversation. That's spiritual warfare in disguise. It shows up in the way they smile when you speak about your beliefs, but not the kind of smile that says, "I hear you." No, it's the smirk that quietly says, "How cute." It's the eye rolls, the long sighs, the subtle jabs. It's the just joking remarks that aren't jokes at all. It's the energy they bring into the room, a quiet resistance that wears you down bit by bit. And that, my friend, is just as real, just as toxic, just as worthy of being removed from your sacred space. You deserve better than that. You deserve to be surrounded by people who, even if they don't share your beliefs, at least honor your journey. People who sit beside you in quiet moments and simply respect the ground you walk on. People who don't poke holes in your truth, just to entertain their own doubts. Because in the end, none of us are staying here forever. We're all passing through, every single one of us. And when that time comes, when our last breath meets the silence, what will matter most won't be how many arguments we won or how clever we sounded in debates. What will matter is how much peace we carried, how well we loved, how deeply we believed. That's the legacy worth building. That's the kind of wealth you can't measure in status or approval, but in soul. And I want that for you. I want you to be able to lay your head down at night with peace, not because life was easy, but because your soul was anchored, because you didn't let mockery rob your reverence, because you kept your faith, even when the world tried to make you feel foolish for it. So when the mockers come, whether they mock with loud voices or quiet silence, sarcasm or side comments, remember this: you don't need their agreement to stay close to God. You just need the courage to guard your faith like the treasure it truly is. Lead into final section. And now, as we come to the final part of this journey, I want to leave you with something simple but powerful. It's about what peace really looks like and why. In the end, protecting it is the most sacred thing you'll ever do. Shall we finish strong?